So welcome to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over the GCSE Maths practice paper 2023 Foundation Set 2 paper 3, which is a calculator paper. Now as always I'll include a question breakdown in the description below so you can see that if you do make a mistake or unsure about a particular question you can see what topic it refers to. So let's get started on this practice paper 2023 Foundation Set 2 paper 3, which is a calculator paper. So getting started on question 1, it says write down the percentage that is equal to 3/4. So hopefully you're able to spot that this as a decimal is 0.75 and that as a percentage is going to be 75%. Then for question 1b, it says write down a fraction that is equal to 0.3. So here you can write, now this probably simplified one is going to be 3/10, but if you wanted to go a little bit rogue and go for 6/20, you could go for 30/100. Any of those would be fine. So anything equivalent to 3/10 would have been absolutely fine because it doesn't actually say for you to have write in its simplest form. For question 2, it says round 37 to the nearest 10. So that should be relatively straightforward and the answer is 40. For question 3, it says Jen has £20. She buys a book for £3.99, 2 magazines for £1.49 each, and a pack of pens for £2.29. She gives half of the change to Tim, and the question is asking how much does Tim receive. So for this, what we need to do is to work out the total spend. So if I write this all down, so it's going to be £3.99 plus £1.49. plus 149, alternatively you could have just done 149 times 2 plus 229, and if I type that all into my calculator I get an answer of £9.26. We then need to work out the total change, so that's going to be 20 minus 9.26, which gives me £10.74. So then how much does Tim receive? Well, it's going to be half of that, so it's 10.74 divided by 2, giving me a final answer of how much does Tim receive, and it's going to be £5.37. Moving on to question 4, it says shade 1/4 of this grid. So for this, all you need to do is to shade any 2 squares. It doesn't really matter where it is, but as long as you've shaded in 2 squares, then that's absolutely fine. If you decide your shading's not great and it goes over the edges like mine has, don't worry too much. As long as it's clear that you've shaded in 2 of those squares, the neatness of the shading is not really going to be that important. Question 5 says here are some cards, and it says choose a card to make the smallest possible answer. So here we've got a choice of some negatives and positive numbers and 2.3 and 1.9. So the correct answer you should have written here is going to be minus 2.3. And if I do that calculation, I get an answer of minus 2.8. And the reason for that is because a plus and a minus become a minus. So then we are subtracting. The next question then says choose a card to make the smallest possible answer. So here the only thing that's different is the sign in the middle has changed. So here what we need to do is we need to write positive 2.3, and that gives us the same answer of minus 2.8. Now it's really important you do write something in both those 2 spaces as it is worth 2 marks. Question 6a says a fair spinner has 6 equal sections. The arrow on the spinner is spun. Complete each of the following sentences with the correct probability. So the first one says the probability that an arrow will land on an 8 is, we've got one section which has gone 8 out of 6, so it's going to be 1/6. For the next one it says the probability that the arrow will land on an odd number. So let's have a look at how many odd numbers we've got. Well, 1, and we've got 5, so then that's going to be 2 out of 6, or you could simplify that as 1/3. Now obviously in this particular question it doesn't say anything about writing your answer in the simplest form, so as long as your fraction is equivalent to 1/6 for the first part and 1/3 for the second one, you will get the full marks for it. Moving on to 9b, it says this fair spinner has 5 equal sections. Write a number in each section so that the probability that the arrow lands on a 4 is 3/5 and the total of the numbers is 21. So for the probability of landing a 4 being 3/5, and we've got 5 sections, means that any 3 of the sections needs to have the number 4. So here we've got 4, 4 and 4. Now it also then says that the sum of the 5 numbers adds up to 21. So if I know that I've already got 3 4s, which is 12, so 12 plus something equals 21. So for this I need to find 2 numbers that multiply together to equal 9. So you can have absolutely any 2 numbers, as long as neither of them are a 4, that add up to make 9. You could go negative, but again, as long as they're 2 numbers, I would probably play it safe and go for 1 and 8. But again, any of those, there's loads of different combinations you could have. But basically, let me just write this down. So these 2 numbers must add up to 9. Moving on to question 7, it says J1, J2, J3 are 3 junctions on a motorway. The distance from J2 to J3 is 8.8 miles, and it says the distance from J1 to J2 is 1/4 of the distance from J2 to J3. And the question is asking us to work out the distance of J1 to J3. Well, for this one, as it's 1/4, that J1 to J2 is 1/4 of J2 to J3. So J1 to J2 is going to equal 1/4. Well, if it's 8.8, to work out quarter I divide by 4, and that gives me an answer of 2.2. So this answer here is going to be 2.2. So J1 to J3 is going to be 2.2 plus 8.8, giving me a total answer of 11 miles. Moving on to question 8, it says A, B and C are 3 vertices of a quadrilateral plotted on a centimetre grid. Plot D on the grid so that ABCD is a rectangle. So what we need to do is we need to plot D here, and the corner of that is 8, 8. It then says for 8B, E is the midpoint of BC, and so the midpoint of BC is going to be here. So I can label that as E. And it then says circle the 2 answers that describes the triangle ABE. So if I just draw that triangle, again, probably should use a ruler for this. So it's definitely not a scaling triangle because not all the sides are different. It's either going to be an isosceles triangle or it's going to be a right angle triangle. And these 2 sides here are the ones that we know are the same. Moving on to 8C, it says write down the ratio of the length of AB to the length of BC. Well, the length of AB is equal to, and let me just go back, is 3 squares. And the distance of B to C is 6 squares. And B to C equals 6. So writing this as a ratio, so A to B, B to C is going to be 3 to 6, which can be simplified as 1 to 2. And again, we need to make sure that we're writing 1 to 2 as the question is asking us to write it in its simplest form, where all the numbers are integers. Moving on to question 9, it says that a bag of sweet contains only red or yellow sweets. There are twice as many red sweets as yellow. What fraction of the sweets are red? Well, if I just write down red and I'll write yellow, and if I just make up a number, so let's say there are 2 red sweets, then there are half as many yellow ones, so that's going to be 1, and then we want to write this situation as a fraction. Now, if I decided I could have 20 and 10, then the fraction is going to be for red is going to be 20 out of 30, or 2 over 3, and there is my simplified fraction. It then says there are 18 red sweets, work out the total number of sweets in the bag. Well, if I know that 2/3 are red then basically what that means is that 2/3 equals 18. So 18 equals 2 parts. So 2 parts equal 18. So 1 part equals 9, and there's a total of 3 parts. So 3 parts is going to equal 27, and that there is my final answer for that one. Moving on to question 10. So here we're looking at factorising 2x minus 4. So here I want to take out, well, both terms have got numbers. So I want to take out the highest number that goes into both 2 and 4, which is 2. And then what do I have to multiply 2 to get 2x? Well, that's going to be x. And I've got minus. What do I have to multiply 2 to get 4? And that's going to be another 2. Moving on to 10b. So here we want to find the value of x. So what I need to do here is get rid of the 1 first, and we do that by doing the opposite. So here I end up with x over 5 equals 10 take away 1, which is 9, and then I get rid of the 5 by doing the opposite. So here I'm multiplying by 5, so I end up with x equals 45. Then moving on to question 11, it says that a scale on a map is 1 to 200,000. Work out the number of kilometres represented by 2 centimetres on the map. Well, 2 centimetres is going to be double this, because if I'm doubling the first number on the left, I then need to double that one, so that's going to be 400,000 centimetres. And then I want to convert this into metres, so I divide by 100, and that will give me what the answer is in metres. And then I've got to divide by another 1,000 to convert that into kilometres. And if I type that all into my calculator, I should have an answer of 4. Moving on to question 12, it says here are the first 3 numbers of a sequence 10, and we've got minus 6 and 4. Each term is obtained by adding the previous 2 terms together. So it's very much similar to a Fibonacci sequence. And the question is asking us to work out the next 2 terms in the sequence. So if I just put 2 dashes here to represent those. So this value here is going to be adding the previous 2 terms. So it's going to be minus 6 plus 4, which is minus 2. And then for this one, we're going to add the previous 2 terms together. So we've got 4 plus minus 2, which is positive 2. So the 2 numbers are going to be minus 2 and 2. The next question then says the sequence continues. How many negative terms are there in the sequence altogether? We need to circle our answer. Well, if we go back to the original sequence, let me just write down those numbers that I know and what I've just recently worked out. Like so. Now if I continue the sequence, so the next number is going to be where I add minus 2 plus 2, which is 0. The next one is going to be 2 plus 0, which is 2. Then it's going to be 0 plus 2, which is 2. Then 2 plus 2, which is 4. Then it's going to be 6, and then it's going to be 8. So the number of negative numbers I can see, and again, we're not going to have a negative number because all the previous numbers are therefore going to be positive. So we're going to have 2 negative numbers. And the reason for I can then write is after 0, all future terms are positive, and you could say a positive plus a positive equals a positive value or number. So something along those lines would be absolutely fine. Moving on to question 13, it says Guy is using this table of results to draw the graph of y equals x plus 1 for values of x from 0 to 10. And here is his graph. So let me just zoom out a little bit so we can see. And the question is asking us to write down 2 different mistakes that he has made. So looking at it, let me just write the mistakes here. Now there are quite a few mistakes that he has made. Now, one of them, probably the most common that you may see, is the line is not straight. So the line should be straight. Another mistake that they've found is that the first point is wrong. So the first point is incorrect. So in other words, 0, 1 is plotted incorrectly. You could also say that they've not labelled the axes. You could also say that, and again, I would probably, if a student did this in my class, I probably wouldn't penalise them for them unless they were drawing more than one line on a graph, but they've not labelled the line. Maybe accepted. But I would say that's probably a tough one to go for. Now, one that you may not have spotted, and I took a while to spot this, is that they actually plotted 2 3s. So plotted 3 on, or I should say 3 appears twice on the x-axis. So let me just rub that out. And so 3 appears twice on the x-axis. And yeah, I'll probably say they're probably the one going to be the most common answers. So any 2 of those would be absolutely fine. Moving on to question 14, let me just zoom back in. So it says the diagram shows a quarter of the circle with radius of 5, and the question is asking us to work out the area of the quarter circle. Well, for this, the area, well, if it was a full circle, the formula is pi r squared, but because it's a quarter circle, I'm going to divide that formula by 4. So substituting those numbers in where r equals 5, I end up with pi times 5 squared divided by 4, and that's going to give me an answer of 25 over 4 pi, or I could write that as a decimal typing that all into my calculator, and I should have an answer of 19.6, and that's been rounded to 1 decimal place. Now, if you've rounded it to 2 decimal places, 6 significant figures, it doesn't really matter. That would be fine as long as the answer matches up with what we've written there. For question 15, it says £500 is invested for 2 years at 3% simple interest per year. Work out the total interest. Now, simple interest is basically where you work out the interest from that amount and then you just multiply it by the time. So the interest amount never changes. So here, 3% of 500 is going to be, well, 5% to 1%, sorry, is going to be 5. So 3% is going to be 15. And you want that for 2 years, so if I do 15 times 2, and that gives me the correct answer of £30. Moving on to question 16, it says that a shape is made using 15 identical rectangles, and it says work out the area of the shape. So for this, what we need is, well, we've got a brick, let's say, or a rectangle. Now we've got 3 of them. We know that 3 of these on their lengths equal 18, so that's going to be 18 divided by 3, which is 6. So this is 6, that's 6, and that's 6. So the length of that rectangle is going to be 18, which we know. Now the next thing for us to then work out is basically what the height of that brick is going to be, which I'm just going to call x. Now in terms of this 18, if I then look at this length here, well, I know this is 6 and I know this is 6, and if I just label the width x, then what I can do is I can write this expression of x plus 6 plus x plus 6 plus x equals 18. Now if I simplify all of that, I get 3x plus 12 equals 18. Now if I then go on to solve this, I get 3x equals 6, so x equals 2. So the dimensions of this brick are 6 by 3. So then I can then work out the height of this mega rectangle, and that's going to be a total of 10. So the total area is going to be 18 times 10, which is 180, and that's going to be in centimetres squared. Moving on to our next question, it says that I'm thinking of a number n, so let's and it says I subtract 3 from my number, divide by 5, and the answer is 2. Work out my final answer if I add 7 to my number and then divide by 4. So first things first, what we want to do is we want to write this equation out. So I'm starting with a number which I'm just going to call n. I subtract 3 and then I divide everything by 5 and the answer is 2. So what I want to do is I want to solve this to try and find out what the original number was. So n minus 3 is going to equal, well, if I times that by 5, I get 10. And then add 3. So the original number was 13. So then from this, what I can then do is then work this out. So he adds 7 to his number and then divides by 4. So 13 plus 7 is 20, divided by 4 gives me an answer of 5. Moving on to question 18, it says the diagram shows a parallelogram ABCD. Work out the size of angle X, and you must show your working, which may be on the diagram, which is great. So looking at this now, what we know, because it's a parallelogram, that this line here is going to be parallel to this line here, and this line here, BC, is going to be parallel to AD. Now that's going to be fact because we know it's a parallelogram. Now another property of a parallelogram is that opposite angles diagonally are equal and angles sharing the same side are supplementary, so it's going to add up to 180. So to work out angle Z, well, for this what I can do is, now there's a couple of ways in which we could do this, and we don't need to. Part B asks us to work out y, so let's work out both x and y on this diagram. So looking at this, we can see now what we're looking for is z's. We're looking for corresponding angles, alternate angles, etc., opposite angles, etc. So first off the bat, I can then work out what this angle here is, because angles inside a triangle add up to 180. So this angle here is going to be 180 minus 95 minus 50, and that gives me an answer of 35 degrees. Now I also know that because it's a parallelogram, that this angle B has to be the same as this angle here. So x plus 35 must equal 110. So then x equals 110 minus 35. And if I type that into my calculator, although I shouldn't need to because it gives me an answer of 75. So that's for part A. Then for part B, to work out y, so if I just label what I now know, so this is 35 and this angle here is 75. So to work out y, I can work out what, well, this angle here makes a Z. Now if you're not sure where that's come from, but if I look at this Z here, now if this angle here is 50, then this means that this angle here is going to be 50. So to work out y, well, I've got to do 180 minus 110 minus 50 equals y, and so y is 20 degrees. Moving on to question 19, it says that a time of 10.4 seconds is given to the nearest 0.1 of a second, and the question is asking us to complete the error interval. So for this, what I need to do is I need to divide what they've rounded it to by 2. So I'm going to do 0.1 divided by 2 is 0.05. Now to find the upper and lower limit, what I do is I add and subtract 0.05. So the lower limit is going to be 10.35 and the upper limit is going to be 10.45. Moving on to question 20, it says these are two right angle triangles that are similar. It then says write down the value of cos x, give your answer as a fraction. So for this, using trigonometry, this is theta, that's h, and this is going to be a. So cos theta equals a over h. So substituting those numbers in, I get cos x equals the adjacent, which is 5, and the hypotenuse, which is 8. So the value of cos x is going to be 5 over 8. And I could write that, and the question is asking me to leave it as a fraction, so I'm not going to write down the decimal equivalent. The next question then says to work out the value of y. Well, for this, the first thing I need to do is to find the length scale factor. And I do that by finding the corresponding sides of both triangles. So I know the base of those. So that's going to be 20 divided by 5. So the length scale factor is going to be 4. So it's 4 times bigger. So then to work out y is going to equal the diagonal on the first triangle, which is 8. Because I'm going from small to big, I multiply by the scale factor. So that's going to be 8 times 4, which is 32 centimetres. Moving on to question 21, it says, in a band with 3 members, the mean age is 21. Ashley joins the band. The mean age of all 4 members of the band is now 22. And the question is asking us to write down the age of Ashley. So taking the first statement first, so we've got 3 members. So I've just got 1, 2, and 3. And we know that all their ages added together divided by 3 equals 21. So for this, if I wanted to work out the total sum of each of those band members, I've got to do 3 times 21, which is 63. So these 3 members, who I'm just going to call A, B, and C, the mean is, so A plus B plus C divided by 3 equals 21. So if I multiply by 3, A plus B plus C must equal 63. So then what happens is then Ashley comes along, and we've got these 3 members, which we're going to call A, B, and C. And now the average age is 22. So we've got A plus B plus C plus Ashley divided by 4 equals 22. So if I take the 4 over by multiplying by 4, then 4 of their ages needs to add up together to give me 88. Well, I know that these 3 people's age adds up to 63. So 63 plus Ashley equals 88. So Ashley equals 88 minus 63. And if I type that into my calculator, I get the correct answer of 25 years old. For question 22, it says the line has an equation of 3x minus 5. Write down the gradient of the line. Well, the gradient is always the number in front of x, including any signs. So the gradient of the line is 3. It then says to work out the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is the number at the end. So you can either write minus 5, or you could write it as a coordinate, which is 0 minus 5. Moving on to question 23, it says John chooses a number at random from the digits of 1 to 4. Matt also chooses a number at random from 1 to 4. Write down the probability that the total of the 2 numbers chosen is 10. Well, if the biggest number is 4 on both of their random digits, then the maximum number is going to be 4 plus 4, which is 8. So it's going to be 0. It's going to be impossible to get 10. So impossible as a probability is going to be 0. The next question then says work out the probability that the total of the 2 numbers chosen is more than 6. So if we write down, I forgot the 2 names, so it's John and Matt. So if I have John's numbers here, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I write Matt's choice, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I'm then going to do is just do a sample space diagram and just add up the numbers. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8. So looking at these are all my possible answers I could have when I add their 2 scores together. So the probability of getting more than 6 is going to be getting a 7 or an 8. So how many of these have I circled? 3 out of how many? 16. Can that be simplified? No, it can't. So there is my final answer. Moving on to question 24, it says at a cinema 3 adults and 2 child tickets cost £46, 1 adult and 2 child tickets cost £24. Work out the cost of an adult ticket and the cost of a child ticket. So hopefully you would have spotted that this is going to be a simultaneous equation question. So I've got 3a plus 2c equals 46 and 1a plus 2c equals 24. Now the steps of working this out is I need to try and get the same number of A's or C's that I've got. So here you can see I've got C's are the same, I've got 2. I then look at the sign and they're both the same. So then what I need to do is take away those two equations. So 3a take away 1a is 2a, 2c take away 2c is nothing, and 46 take away 24 leaves me with 22. So 2a equals 22, so a equals £11. So then if I take one of the sort of combos, we know that 1a plus 2c equals 24. I now know the price of an adult ticket, which is 11. So then if I take that 11 away, I then get 2c equals 20. That's going to be 13. And then 1c is going to be 13 divided by 2, which is 6.5. So the price of a child ticket is going to be £6.50. Moving on to question 24, it says the area of an ellipse with width A and B is given by, and we've got this formula. The sign is made from a rectangular metal sheet measuring 3.6 meters by 1.2, and the question is asking us that the shaded area section are removed to make a sign. Work out the percentage of the rectangular metal sheet used to make the sign. So for this, what we need to do is we need to work out the area of the oval and the area of the rectangle. So here, the area of the oval. Now we've been given the formula for this, which is this formula here. So substituting those numbers in, an A and B. So A is 1.2 and B is 3.6. So this formula then is going to be pi times 1.2 multiplied by 3.6 divided by 4. And if I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of 27 over 25 pi. Or I can write that as a decimal, which gives me, and just bear with me while I type that all in, it gives me an answer of 3.3929 blah blah blah. Now the area of the rectangle is just the base times the height, so that's going to be 1.6 times 3.2, and that gives me an answer of 4.32. So to work out the percentage, what I need to do is use 3.3929 blah blah blah, depending on what you've rounded that up to, divided by the area of the rectangle, and we multiply that by 100. Now if I type that all into my calculator, so 3.3929 divided by 4.32, multiply that by 100, and I get an answer of 78.539 blah blah blah. So you can give any answer, so I'm going to write this as a 1 decimal place of 78.5%, and that's to 1 decimal place. Now in terms of the mark scheme, they would accept any answer between 78.5 to 78.7, or they would accept a rounded answer of 79%. So any of those would be absolutely fine. Then moving on to our last question, it says Company A claims that their products are half as likely to be as faulty compared to Company B. In a sample, 4% of the products of Company A were faulty. Here are the results of a sample of Company B. And the question is asking us to comment on Company's A claim. So for this, what we need to do is we want to work out what percentage of Company B's products were faulty. So Company B's faulty rate is going to be equal to how many faulty items there are, 32, over the total. So this is going to be 32 plus 368 is 400. So that's going to be over 400. And if I type that into my calculator, multiply it by 100, and I get an answer of 8%. So their claim is that their company's A products are half as likely as company B. Well, here we can see that, so the conclusion is that company A's claim is correct, as 8% divided by 2 equals 4. And writing that would be absolutely fine. So for the marks on how this would be awarded, you would get 1 mark for working out that it's 8%, 1 mark for probably working out the ratio here, so that would be worth 1 mark, and 1 mark for then stating whether company A's claim is correct or false.